And happening right now, our top story at 6 o'clock tonight, protests now spilling into the streets, taking over Las Vegas Boulevard. Las Vegas now joins the many communities protesting the death of a black man at the hands of police. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Todd Quinones.
And I'm Trisha Keene. Live team coverage of the protest in just a moment. Here's the very latest on this case, though. The former officer seen on video kneeling on Floyd is arrested and charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. Prosecutors say they anticipate charges against the other 3 officers. Let's get you out right now to what's happening on the Las Vegas Strip. 13 Action News reporter Joe Bartels begins our team coverage. And I know, Joe, you mentioned this is like nothing you've seen before.
Yeah, Todd and Tricia, the police response has been overwhelming, I think, with the number of units I've seen really converging from all across the city. I was driving in right around 4:30 or so, and I saw units kind of in my rearview mirror just flying, lights and sirens rushing from every corner of the city to get to the Las Vegas Strip here to provide backup for the units that were already here. I'm going to get out of the way here and get you a live look. This is Flamingo right at Las Vegas Boulevard, and you can see the contingents of officers here. This is kind of the southern edge of it. The protesters walked past Flamingo here, which is shut down just around 4:30 or 5:30, excuse me, and they walked past the police without any kind of incident. And then beyond this contingent of officers, which are wearing their helmets and tactical gear, you can see just a sea of police cars and police lights and just flashing there, blocking the most famous street in the world, the famous Las Vegas Strip, shut down right now. Also, traffic from Flamingo and I-15 is shut down in both directions. This intersection would normally be crawling with cars, but at the moment, literally nobody except police officers. This also is taking place right now. You can kind of hear the protesters, a few of them kind of around here holding up signs and saying no justice, no peace. This all is taking place in the backdrop of the Culinary Union. They had a driving caravan to protest the reopening of some of the strip properties, citing that they don't believe that the strip properties are being as transparent. You can probably hear them right behind me here. They're holding up signs. This one right here, Rudy, says open safely. A lot of folks here from the Culinary Union honking their horns, also showing support for the folks with the Black Lives Matter movement. They're obviously having their voices heard, but we have 2 protests kind of converging at once here in the famous Las Vegas Strip. I've also seen NHP as well, a whole, look like a squad of them racing down Flamingo towards I-15. And so they've got traffic blocked over here. You can see all the metro units. They're kind of holding the southern flank. And further down, just to the south of where I'm at, Jackie Kostek is live. And Jackie, you were among some of the protesters earlier, right in the thick of things. What were folks telling you there?
Yeah, Joe, this has been quite a long day. We have been out here since about 1:30 this afternoon. Those protesters started gathering first at the Miracle Mile right across here, and then they moved to the Bellagio. Dozens of people turned into hundreds of people. They made their way all the way north on the Strip to Circus. They spent some time up there chanting, playing music. They turned around and they made their way back south on the Strip, and that is where you've seen the heavy police presence. Earlier today, around 2 o'clock when this first started, we watched Metro officers speaking to protesters, and they were saying, they were echoing Sheriff Joe Lombardo's statements from last night that what he saw in Minneapolis was very deeply disturbing. They were echoing those statements, and they said that they were on the protesters' side in terms of wanting to keep it safe and peaceful. Well, now you're looking at the Strip. We see police in riot gear, as Joe said earlier, just a heavy police presence on an otherwise fairly empty Las Vegas Strip, but it's something that I have never seen here either. Okay, now we're seeing these officers making their way north on the Strip. They're walking slow and steady, and we're not sure what is just past these officers. They have been making, let's take a listen in real quick.
Todd Arbery. How about him, who was shot while jogging? This isn't just one case. We're very angry. It's not just George Floyd. It's an accumulation of cases and people like George Floyd.
Okay, so that was a protester that we spoke to earlier in the day, and that's just building in some of the context for why we are seeing all of these protesters out on the Strip all day long and obviously into the evening right now. They're not just protesting what happened in Minneapolis earlier today with earlier this week with George Floyd. They are protesting police brutality over the decades and really generations in our country, that it is about way more than just George Floyd, although it is about him as well. We are watching these officers now moving north just in front of Paris, and they had said about 15 minutes ago that they were, there was some unlawful protesters that were on the street and they would be dispersing them. So we are going to take a listen in real quick. It looks like those officers in riot gear are backing up to where those officers are right now. We are listening to people say, "Let her go." I cannot see anything. Yes, I can hear you, Todd.
Let her go!
Okay,
Yeah,
now
Jackie,
we're watching an officer. They have.
It appears.
Let her go!
I'm sorry, Todd. Now we are watching officers taking away the first protester that we have seen being arrested.
Thank you for your mercy, girl! That's one person and 20 cops! You're so fucking sad, girl! Don't let the police say you're fucking sad!
I apologize. We are hearing some language out here today, but we are watching these cops as they have arrested this first protester, at least on our side of the strip. On the south side of the strip, we're still watching. On the other side, officers moving north. There may be more people. We can't see it. We don't have a clear picture right now. But as you can see, that woman is being put into the Metro Cruiser right now. Todd, I'm so sorry. What were you trying to ask earlier?
Well, I guess as we just watched the situation unfold, and again, we apologize for the language on television, but for the most part, are people obeying police officers' commands, and have you seen any examples of any kind of property damage or vandalism?
I did not witness this happening, but as we were making our way back south on the strip around 3:45, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we drove by a string of Las Vegas police cruisers, and one of them did have a tag, BLM, Black Lives Matter tag on it. We didn't see a person putting that tag on the car, but we did see that. I did post a picture of that on Twitter earlier. Other than that, we have not seen any violence. I know that where Joe is right now, it's a much more active scene, but we did see tensions rising throughout the afternoon. Earlier in the day, very peaceful chanting, but as the protesters were moving back south on the strip, we definitely heard more language and more interactions with police.
The things I noticed, it's
Tricia Joe Bartel's.
Oh, I was sorry. I was going to ask Jackie.
Ahead,
Jackie,
Tricia,
I noticed that a lot of the protesters are armed with their cell phones and they're taking video of their interactions that they're having with Metro police there. I could see that from the vantage point that we're looking at here in the studio. Have you seen that there on the ground?
Tricia, 100%. We have seen protesters. I know that I have been out here as a reporter with my phone out all day, taking videos, taking photos, and I look back at the playback of those videos, and you can see half of the protesters probably with their phones up as well, recording all of this. And that's what we've really seen play out across the country with these situations like we saw in Minneapolis, where if you record it, then that is able to be used as evidence. So I think that that's a big reason why a lot of the protesters have had their phones out today, and that's what they've told me at least, that they want to have that evidence if
Jackie,
necessary. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear what police are trying to tell the crowd right now? I know it may be difficult, but can you make out what they're trying to tell the crowd?
Before we came on air about 15 minutes ago, they were saying that they needed everyone to disperse. They had started moving north. I watched for 5 or 10 minutes as officers were just feet away from a lineup of protesters right here at the Bellagio on the Las Vegas Boulevard. And I haven't really been able to hear over the last couple of minutes, but I know that they were asking protesters to disperse, and they had made mention of unlawful protesting, which means that they were out on the street and, not on the curb.
Yeah, from Chopper 13, we can see that Metro Police, they have several people that they're escorting towards the car. So I'm not sure if these protesters will be put under arrest. It appears that could be the case here, and we don't know for what reason they're being questioned or for why. But that's the latest. You can see that from Chopper 13 right there. So I've seen about three or four people now, the protesters that Metro have taken to the side here near the cars from the Chopper 13 vantage point.
And let's get back to Joe Bartels. Joe, from your vantage point, what are you seeing? Are you seeing people cooperate with police? And I know, first of all, you also talked about your coverage during 1 October, and you sort of compared the police response to 1 October to kind of what you're seeing now in terms of the sheer volume of officers.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I can really equate it to, just the number of officers, and the rushing to the scene is the best way I can describe it, is eerily reminiscent of that terrible tragedy. Thank goodness not nearly anything like that, but still the police presence is on that par, it seems. Here at Las Vegas Boulevard and Flamingo, since we last saw you, I'm going to get out of the way really quick, Rudy Garcia will show you, police have now formed a line of cruisers. They've now totally blocked here Flamingo and Las Vegas Boulevard. Now they're standing almost shoulder to shoulder with their tactical gear on, their helmets, and we can see them kind of just getting in position. And Rudy, if you pan to the left, we now have a group of folks that have now gathered just in front of the Cromwell, holding up signs, it looks like. Not sure where these folks have come, but we have seen people kind of coming off the escalators and the stairs and coming from other areas and parking and maybe coming here to try and join. They're seeing what's going on social media, perhaps on the news, and wanting to become involved here. But Rudy, if you pan back to the right here, we see now a line farther down on Las Vegas Boulevard, now advancing forward. Now, Todd and Tricia, we know from past experience, for example, we saw some folks expressing their displeasure with the ordinance in Las Vegas on Fremont Street when they shut down Fremont Street. Metro Police will tolerate this to a point. This is when typically we saw maybe their horseback unit coming in and starting to clear folks out. That maybe not be an option at this point. I know that Metro Police had scaled back their horseback operations, so now they're on 2 feet. They're watching this carefully, but pretty short order, they're going to step in here, and we've seen it before where they'll have people taken into custody and start to clear the road out here because they will not allow this to go on for maybe much longer. Earlier, when we saw that group of people just filing up Las Vegas Boulevard in the street, they walked right by the police. There was no violence. There was no escalation. There was really nothing. Police just let them walk on by. There was no confrontation or escalation. But again, depending on how long this goes on, police will be watching this very carefully. I did also see their air units overhead doing circles and doing orbits, and so they're watching that also from the sky as well. We also know that their counterterrorism office is watching their high-definition cameras up and down the strip, so they're watching this very carefully. Everything is also recorded too. So, these interactions with police, of course, we're covering it as well from Chopper 13, traffic cameras, us on the ground. We have Jackie Kostek just a little bit farther away from us, but also those high-definition cameras that police are monitoring. All that video is recorded as well. So that is certainly something that they're mindful of and watching closely. Another thing that we also mentioned, that there was this Culinary Union protest that's been going on. We've seen a number of cars honking their horns, holding signs, people out in traffic at one point. I did tweet out some video also of some folks expressing their support for the Black Lives Matter, but of course they have their own demonstration they were planning to show their displeasure with the reopening of some of the Strip properties. They're demanding more transparency with the reopening procedures and cleaning procedures as we move closer. We're of course in phase 2 today, so there's a lot of things going on, a lot of elements at the present moment in the works, but in the backdrop of what's going on nationally, Las Vegas front and center right now with the displeasure and the concerns with what happened in Minnesota. Folks here clearly upset, expressing their outrage and frustration, not only with police, but just in general, right. the sense of the racial inequality in this country, guys.
And that's one thing, Joe, that I think that is interesting watching this protest. It's a diverse protest on the Black Lives Matter side. The folks are definitely diverse. And one of the things that protesters have been saying across the country is just this sentiment of not having quick action. The videotape was out there and the charges to be brought forth on this Friday. And so I think that's something as well that people are protesting as well. how this was initially handled from the get-go.
Yeah, there was certainly frustration. Of course, there's been other incidents in the previous years, and that was the concern that folks saw this video and there wasn't the immediate justice perhaps that they saw. We now know that officer has been arrested and charged with murder. There's now lingering questions about the other officers involved and what their fate may play out or may hold, but certainly that is a frustration. They've been watching it very carefully, and now they're taking their frustrations and putting action to it and holding up signs and taking over the strip and walking to show their displeasure. One of the things is that it's kind of a rolling closure, so there's parts of the strip that are open right now. Rudy Garcia, if you actually, let's show there's an ambulance that just showed up here, an AMR ambulance, and one of the things here, of course, it's very hot, and we talked about this, and it's a very hot day, so you start to consider people's dehydration and maybe not getting acclimated as quickly to the weather as well. That's a concern for these folks. I haven't seen any violence or property damage, but just the sheer heat of it and making sure you're hydrated and you're not suffering from heat exhaustion. Those are all factors as well. So it looks like they've got medical standing by, ready to go. And as we're talking here, Rudy Garcia, you see that line of officers now moving ever closer. So now they're about halfway by the length of the Bellagio fountains. Another horn honking here, perhaps someone showing their support, but police now advancing to the north, kind of pushing some people who are maybe stragglers away. I can see, Rudy, over by just to your left in the middle there of the line, I see the Bally's sign, the CVS. There's a bunch of folks there that looks like they're kind of a group that's now being kind of ushered up this way. So we'll see what happens when these two lines converge. This will be maybe the line that police have drawn. They won't let people pass this point. So this could be moving towards an escalation, perhaps. One of the things, Todd, I heard you talking about earlier was property damage. Right now, this would be a totally different scenario if the strip was open and we had casinos open and those doors are open and people could go in and out, and there could be some real another level of complication. I'm now hearing very faintly, probably you can hear, sounds like police on a loud horn addressing the crowd. I can only imagine it's telling them to disperse and that their gathering is now unlawful and arrests will be imminent. I believe, if memory serves me correctly, one of my sources told me that they give 3 verbal warnings to disperse and then the arrests begin. So that may be what we're seeing here. We're watching it very closely, but police starting to pinch, if you will, this line together right in front of Bally's, the iconic Bally's here, right under the Eiffel Tower here in Las Vegas, on the most famous street in the world. Guys, we're watching this very, very closely.
And it's interesting, Joe, again, you see the cell phone videos rolling as the protesters are being spoken to by police. Have you seen that? I asked Jackie that earlier. She saw quite a few protesters out there today as they're in front of the police officers recording what's happening, just for documentation, basically.
Yeah, almost certainly. That's, cell phone in one hand and maybe a sign in the other. That's been pretty much the MO that I've seen folks documenting this and recording it, feeling to document everything. And that's what one of the flyers I saw for the BLM movement was to document actions, interactions with police, and to watch them carefully, and as a means of protection, perhaps, to record every interaction, to then therefore maybe put on social media to show the world and their estimation of what's going on. And so that camera, as you mentioned, the unblinking eye, and of course everything video-wise is all about context and what you see, what you don't see, what leads up to that interaction, of course, is all things taken into consideration. But when you mention people doing, social justice and holding up their cameras and maybe documenting it or going on social media and going live, and that's what we have seen out here.
Yeah, and that was also, if you go ahead, Todd.
Well, I just wanted to maybe check back in with Jackie real quick. Jackie, if you could hear me, I know you talked to some of these protesters earlier. Obviously, the epicenter of this rage and this anger is in Minneapolis. But I'm wondering, did the protesters to you explain if they have some of this anger directed towards our local police, or did they give a sense of that?
Todd, they really did not. the scene that I sort of described earlier around 2 o'clock this afternoon when protesters were first in front of the Bellagio, they had this moment with Metro Police where the Metro Police were saying that they are here to keep this demonstration safe today. They're here to keep the protesters safe. And there was one man who was just over my right shoulder who yelled out an expletive. And there were a couple people who sort of nodded their heads in agreement. I asked to speak with him after to elaborate on what he was saying. And unfortunately, he did not want to go into exactly what he meant. But, you know, there were other protesters who said that we have had issues with police-involved shootings here as well. And it's something that I know that we saw in Minneapolis too. George Floyd was not the first unarmed black man to die at the hands of police. And so, yeah, there hasn't been a ton of conversation about that, but really the primary conversation here is that it is much, much bigger than George Floyd. It is, they're demanding justice in that case, but they're demanding justice across the board. They want the end to systemic racism that, you know, has been around in this country for 400 years.
Absolutely, Jackie.
And Jackie, I know last time we saw with you, they were arresting people. And I don't know whose camera we're looking at right now, but are they still arresting people right now?
So we have something on the south side of the Strip near the Bellagio and the Las Vegas Boulevard. I have not seen, let's see, I'm going to peek in front of the camera really quick. I have not seen anyone else be arrested on our side of the Strip. I know that what Joe was seeing seemed to be much more active. We did watch a couple folks sort of step into the street right in front of us, and police officers did tell them to kick back behind. If they wanted to get around to where the other protesters were, they were going to have to go all the way around, probably to Koval, streets parallel to Las Vegas Boulevard. So they were not going to be able to get through and push north on Las Vegas Boulevard to where the other protesters are.
All right, Jackie, thank you. I understand that person being arrested was from Joe's camera with Rudy there. Joe, take us through, what did you just see?
Well, this is it right here. We see folks running right by the bus stop there. Rudy, right over to the left of that escalator there. This looks like this is the line that police have drawn. This is now, we see some jarring between the frontline officers. Rudy, just here right there, right at the base of that elevator or the escalator, you can see there was some folks talking face to face with some of the police, and now they're kind of pushing these protesters off of Las Vegas Boulevard now, and now these folks are moving through what looks like Bally's and all the shops that are there, the bazaar shops, and they're moving kind of to the east now, maybe towards the Bally Valet area, if you're familiar with that area. Now police have kind of stopped. They've moved. They were moving on foot, but now they have stopped. So now it looks like they've moved the protesters farther down, maybe on Flamingo and into the Bally's property, and points to the east there. And again, traffic shut down. You cannot drive eastbound on Flamingo from basically I-15. I know NHP has, you can hear the horns honking now. More folks showing their support. But traffic, obviously a mess right now, despite the Strip being shut down. No traffic is getting through on Flamingo here. Tempers now flaring. I see drivers kind of disobeying the traffic laws. At one point I saw cars being kind of turned around because they were trapped on Flamingo at Las Vegas Boulevard. As these protesters moved through, they started to turn vehicles around in the wrong direction and kind of cleared that out. But now we may have a situation east of the boulevard on Flamingo as folks are still holding up their signs. Rudy, right by that bus stop, you can see someone, I can see the sign says, "I can't breathe," I believe. More officers now walking across Las Vegas Boulevard at Flamingo here, right in the center of the street. I see more people holding up their phones and signs. We'll see what police do here, but there are some folks that have now crossed over the pedestrian bridge. They're coming down the escalator, down the stairs, right in front of the Cromwell here. Police now moving also in that direction. So we'll see. They're trying to pinch folks off. I can actually see security inside the Cromwell right now. You can see those yellow shirts, Rudy. We see security for the property inside. So they're clearly watching this very carefully, making sure that no glass is broken, no windows are breached perhaps. And then you have folks inside. These properties have been shut down since mid-March, and you can see police kind of now directing people, telling them to move. I see one officer now jumping over a fence, climbing over a fence there, multiple of them, and they're prepared. They've got their tactical vests on, their helmets on in case any kind of objects are thrown. I haven't seen anything along those lines so far. Peaceful. And no violence so far, but certainly the propensity has been there in other parts of the country. Go ahead, Tricia.
Absolutely, Joe. You know, earlier at 5 o'clock, it looked like such a big crowd that was passing you by. When you saw the whole march come down Las Vegas Boulevard, a guesstimate of how many people were at this Black Lives Matter march today?
So when I was I was kind of at the top of the pedestrian bridge of Las Vegas Boulevard here near the Flamingo on kind of the west side of the street, and I saw probably maybe 500 to 700 people filing past me, and they were chanting, cheering. They were kind of greeted by cars that were stuck in traffic. They kind of walked around them, honking their horns. Most of them, it looked like from the Culinary Union, a lot of them showing their support, of course, for social disorder perhaps, or social justice, and showing their displeasure. That's one of their ways that they also get their points across as well. So kind of the two protests coming together, but just the people from the Black Lives Matter movement I saw on foot holding signs. I would estimate between 500 and 700. It was stretched out. There was kind of a flow of people walking past me, past Flamingo on Las Vegas Boulevard, and then they moved past my line of sight, past what it looked like. You can hear someone saying Black Lives Matter behind me, but past on Las Vegas Boulevard, right around Spring Mountain, it looked like there was, that's where people kind of went beyond my line of sight because the Las Vegas Boulevard kind of curves off into the right there. So you can see some more folks here, a lot of traffic, but they have to go left or right when they get to Flamingo. You cannot go straight through on Las Vegas Boulevard. And Rudy, could you pan back to maybe the folks, the police officers right at the corner of Bally's over there? You can see them. There's still some protesters there standing their ground, not moving. We haven't heard the bullhorn now in a while, telling people to disperse immediately, telling people that their assembly was unlawful and that they were being asked to leave, but I haven't seen or heard anything beyond that right now. And I see some more folks, Rudy, you see that bus shelter over there, more folks kind of standing their ground, not really moving away, but also not advancing towards the police holding up their signs, guys.
And have we heard from Metro at all today?
So, Joe,
have we heard from Metro at all today, Joe? Have they made anybody available just to talk about overall what's been happening and what the nature of the arrests are for?
I am checking on Twitter right now. I haven't even had a chance to check my email. That's typically how Las Vegas Metro Police shares information with us. And we're kind of doing everything remotely, so I don't have the benefit of a producer in my ear telling me any additional details that we're seeing right now. I know we got folks in the booth. So if you guys get any information as I'm live here on TV, let me know, and I'll kind of reiterate here. But we see, Rudy, to your right here, go back to those folks right there. You see more jarring to your right, Rudy, right there at the Bally's, the guy in the orange shirt right there. You can see more jarring, some animated body gestures, some pointing perhaps. Police, we saw earlier, Jackie mentioned that we saw Captain Dory Corin. He's basically the commander of the Convention Center Command. He's oversees this whole area, which is the Strip. He was reasoning with people, explaining their position that they want to keep people safe, and it seemed like it went over well, but there was no give or take necessarily in terms of people like, okay, we understand, let's disperse. They still wanted to show their displeasure and their frustration, anger with the situation with police, not only here, but of course nationwide. But I'm looking right now on the LVMPD Twitter page to see if there's any new updates, but I have not seen. I had a source tell me that there are now upper command staff now that have arrived on scene. These are undersheriffs, I understand. So there are, some higher ups here that are overseeing and watching this very carefully. Metro, of course, takes this extremely serious. They I would say, in most jurisdictions and agencies, they do a proactive job of trying to stay informed with the community, being partners with the community. That's one of their it's on all of their cars, it's on headquarters, partners with the community. So that is one of their mantras, and they live to that as much as they possibly can. Sheriff Joe Lombardo did tweet out just yesterday about the death of Mr. Floyd. He says he is deeply disturbed. The officer's actions and inaction are inconsistent with the training and protocols of our profession and the LVMPD. I can assure you the LVMPD will strive each day to continue to build your trust. Guys.
And Joe, I'm curious, as we're seeing, looks like from Chopper, people spilling over onto other streets. From where this whole thing began to where we are now, have you seen sort of the impact of the officers' action? In other words, are you seeing the streets getting cleared out, not from where we're looking at right now, but where we were looking at just earlier?
I have not seen much in the way of interaction. They've been, as far as I could tell, as hands-off as possible with the protesters, letting them have their space, letting them do what they want to do, essentially within reason, of course. But I have not seen the escalation of violence or escalation of tensions necessarily. It seems like police are letting them have their voice and show their displeasure and then move along. And so just as we were kind of talking, Rudy, if you want to go back to Bally's there, we had that kind of heated exchange just moments ago. Now those folks, that guy in the orange shirt has kind of moved away. We have one straggler, looks like in a golden knight shirt, I think, holding up a phone there, but he's kind of the last one. And even, Rudy, if you show that bus shelter there, that group that was there has now dwindled. There's only a handful of folks there holding up signs. And just even to the left of that, you can see the contingents of officers here on the corner right at Flamingo and Las Vegas Boulevard, right in front of the Cromwell, kind of right there, just steps away from the Cromwell, which is closed. You can see officers are drinking some water, kind of taking a relaxed stance. I wouldn't say they're totally relaxed. They're ready for action at any moment, but not at a tension that we saw maybe 15, 20 minutes ago.
All right, there's a big crowd right there that we're looking at from our Chopper 13. The Black Lives Matter movement is straight face-to-face with Metro officers. Everything appears to be peaceful. We've seen some people taken for arrest. We don't know the nature of exactly why they've been arrested or taken away. Obviously, unlawful behavior of some sort. And I'm just trying to read all the signs down there. Black Lives Matter, and trying to listen to the audio
and I believe,
well.
Tricia, we're listening to some of our producers tell us Chopper 13 right now. This, I believe, is right near the Fashion Show Mall. Is what we're seeing now. This is sort of the largest group that we've seen in the past maybe 5-10 minutes or so. So you can see there maybe a group of 50 to 70 people, but that is the largest group. Yeah, there we can see there's the Fashion Show Mall right there by the Wind. So that gives you a sense of exactly what we're looking at right now. Thank you for that wide shot Chopper 13. But that's the biggest crowd. Okay, now we're also flipping over. Thank you for that other view. Is this also the same viewpoint, I believe, of the same crowd from our traffic camera as well? Now, Joe and Jackie, I know you guys cannot see what we are seeing. It looks like a group of maybe, I would estimate, roughly 50 to 80 people maybe holding signs right by the Fashion Show Mall. Are you guys, Jackie, are you seeing still any kind of large, sizable crowds where you are?
Yeah, Todd, just in the last probably 45 minutes, there has been a complete disbursement, if that is a word, of people. We watched just about an hour ago all of these folks, hundreds, maybe thousands of folks, right in this section of Las Vegas Boulevard near the Bellagio, near the Aria. And the officers were allowing them to stretch south a little bit, and then everyone turned around and headed back north. And that is, they began those sort of lines, drawing the line of the sand, in the sand, if you will. The officers face to face with the protesters just feet away. And now, as you can see, 45 minutes later, there's really no one on this side of the strip. So most of those protesters have either dispersed, left the strip completely, or moved north. And I imagine Joe has a better viewpoint of what's going on in sort of the middle area of the strip.
Yeah, we should mention. Yeah, we should mention this is just.
Sorry, I'm talking over you, Tricia. I just wanted
That's
to let you
okay.
know that, yeah, we kind of saw that large group of folks kind of moving up, and that was a big contingent of folks that we saw around 5:20 or so, and they kind of headed up to the north. Away from our vantage point, but then there was some stragglers that were between Jackie and I, and then we saw police kind of pinch that line together, and then they kind of funneled now on Flamingo and Rudy. I don't know if you can tell. Looks like there's a group of about, I don't know. This pole's probably in your way. If you want to move over just to the left, Rudy, to kind of get a shot of down at the Bally's sign there in the valet area. There looks like you can move and just show the folks at home. There's about, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 people there. Again, traffic shut down, some folks kind of walking in the roadway there, but traffic you can't shut down. Looks like at maybe Koval they have it shut down, it looks like. So people can't come through, so they're kind of, I'm sure traffic over there is kind of jammed up as well as police try to get kind of a perimeter going and try to wrangle what looks like different groups of protesters that have kind of split off now. We have this smaller group here, the larger contingent perhaps, because that's where I saw the bulk of the folks kind of head up towards the fashion show. But
All right.
here, police, Rudy, if you want to look to the right here, just real quick, Tricia, before I let you go, you can see the folks on the other side of the cruiser line. There's all sorts of officers. I see police officers in their tactical vests, their brown uniforms, also in their greens, they call them, and also we see officers, motorcycle officers as well. So they have a whole different type, and the folks in the yellow there, those are usually the convention center officers wear yellow and they're on their bikes as well. They're very, they have a lot of resources of different types of officers that can respond. So they've got a whole contingent of different types of officers out here. Tricia.
All right, we want to go to Jackie too, because tonight, Jackie, you have a protester who's here with you who wants to say a few things tonight.
Absolutely, Tricia. Yeah, I'm here with Variant. And Variant, tell me why you are out here tonight.
First of all, I would prefer for someone who is black for their voice to be heard over mine. I am a person of color, but their voices right now are the ones that really do need to be heard. I'm here to show support. I live in a predominantly low-income, people of color neighborhood, and we're always under constant watch by the police, and it's really unfair when it's a really peaceful neighborhood. So I'm here to show support because that's what they deserve. I also want to make sure that my black brothers and sisters have people to hide behind. I'm light-skinned, so I have that advantage, and I want them to be able to feel safe and for me to be able to be useful so that way they can be heard.
In terms of the protest here today, we haven't seen really any violence on our side, but we have seen violent protests in Minneapolis. What is your reaction to seeing what is playing out, both with what happened to George Floyd and what has happened since?
Sorry. Thank you. I think they have every right to get violent. Their voices haven't been heard for since the founding of this country. They should be violent. They have every right to be angry. Everyone should be angry. It's unfair just to watch these innocent American people constantly get treated like absolute crap. I'm not going to get mad at them for being violent. Their voices need to be heard. It's what needs to happen.
Thank you so much for talking to us tonight. I really appreciate it. And Tricia and Todd, we are going to try to move to a location that we can show you a little bit more now, because like I said, over the last hour or so, this entire area has really cleared out. We actually just have watched 4, 5, 6 police cruisers turn around and make their way back north on the Las Vegas Strip. So I think they're probably heading to what you were talking about earlier, more action, more protesters still up by the Fashion Show Mall.
All right, Jackie, we should mention, though, tonight there's hundreds of people across the country in demonstrations just like you're seeing right here on the Las Vegas Strip. It's an eventful night across the U.S. In fact, earlier tonight, the White House went on a lockdown as protesters chanted George Floyd's name earlier tonight. So we're seeing scenes like this play out across the country tonight. And it's been happening for the last 4 days in cities across the country, beginning in Minneapolis in the wake of George Floyd's death. So here we've been seeing this march, the Black Lives Matter march, started about 5 o'clock and it's now 6:37. So it's been going strong now for an hour and a half, Todd.
Yeah, and Trisha, I think as best as what I can see from what we're monitoring from Chopper 13 and also from our traffic camera right in the area there. You see Maggiano's there by the Fashion Show Mall. This appears to be, at least for the moment, the sort of a hot spot up and down the Las Vegas Strip where the largest crowd has gathered right now. We saw a group of maybe 50 to 80 people or so hanging around there. Now they've begun to disperse. You just saw that white bus pull up live on television. You saw those Metro police officers then coming out of that bus. I imagine they're using that bus as a way to quickly escort officers up and down the Strip, and now you're seeing a larger police presence there at that location in front of Fashion Show Mall than we saw just 10 minutes ago. So I assume we're going to begin to see this tactic play out until these crowds continue to disperse, because we're seeing this crowd break up from this group of 50 to 80. Now you see a reduced crowd right now as more officers showed up, and I'm seeing people, they're leaving slowly. Now we're seeing these Metro officers forming that line. And again, Joe, you've talked about this, the Metro officers forming the line and sort of slowly pushing the crowd back. And you were saying your sources are telling them telling you that Metro is going to give the crowd essentially 3 verbal warnings. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was my understanding, is that police, as a matter of department policy, when they're trying to disperse perhaps a crowd that they deem has formed unlawfully, they will announce at least 3 times that your presence is now unlawful and to disperse immediately, and giving plenty of warning for folks to be aware that police do not want them there. They've deemed them to be in an unlawful assembly, and then they will move in. That is exactly what I saw when there was protests with the City of Las Vegas ordinance for homeless people and camping on sidewalks and whatnot. That was several months ago. It seems like a lifetime ago now, but that is what we saw. Then police moved in and arrested, I believe it was 9 or 12 people, about a dozen people or so, if memory serves me correctly. Similarly, what we saw, we heard the loudspeaker. Maybe they're giving even more advanced warning, telling folks to disperse and get out of the way. Let me show you, Rudy Garcia will show you now. Looks like right at the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Flamingo, from where we're seeing, where that group that was maybe at the bus shelter just to the east of there has now moved maybe closer to the police. They're standing there, kind of a stalemate. It doesn't look like they're advancing towards police, and the police have not advanced towards them. So kind of just a stare down at this moment from what we're seeing. But my producer, Alex Wiles, was telling me that a lot of people, and that's where the largest contingent of folks that we saw move past us around 4:30, about 2 hours ago now, moved up closer to Fashion Show, and that's where it appeared from Chopper 13. I saw our chopper, I lost visual, I believe it's still up, but we were seeing those folks over there, and then some other stragglers, if you will, that were kind of milling about over by Paris and Bally's and the CVS over here in Beer Park. They were kind of flushed out and then moved towards and across the Bally's property and to points to the east. I'm not seeing the folks now in the street as much now in Flamingo Road between Las Vegas Boulevard and Koval. So perhaps people are starting to disperse. Again, heat is also another factor. We've got medical personnel out here standing by. We haven't seen anyone tended to or treated for injuries, violence, or heat-related incidents for that matter.
Joe, in our chopper shot, you just saw officers somewhat charge the crowd, and they did disperse. There was a big disbursement of the crowd out there just moments ago. We were watching it live, and now you see what appears to be, there you go, there's another vantage point. You see that right there, a charge of the crowd, and it looks like as if they started running, and police just started rushing that crowd, and they started dispersing there. It was happening live there on TV, so there's less of a crowd. You still see that right there, the line that the officers are building, and just somewhat pushing into the crowd as trying to disperse the crowd, and that's what's happening. And with people holding signs, I saw a big sign that just said "No!" exclamation point, and that's what you're looking at right now. I do also.
Yeah, we're looking at that, Tricia. Yeah, we see that line that Metro is forming there, and then you see right behind that line You see the officers in the black, in all black gear, and kind of what we saw before is that line, that metro line of officers sort of open up, and that second group of officers sort of kind of rush towards the crowd to sort of essentially looking like, in layman's terms, sort of scare the crowd away, and we saw a lot of them running
Disperse, yeah.
in the opposite direction. And now we're starting to see some of them come back again, and sort of we're watching this play out again. Metro forming that one line, that first line that we're all looking at right there, right in front of Maggiano's, and then you see that the second group of officers just behind that line in all black clothing. And I'm curious if they're going to continue sort of to do this and play this scene out over and over again until this crowd does finally disperse.
You know, I think it's important to mention that we've reached out to Metro for comment, and we have not heard back as of right now. But I do want to give you an idea also of just the stance that Metro Sheriff Joe Lombardo took as we look at these pictures. He tweeted out yesterday that the death of Mr. Floyd is deeply disturbing. The officer's actions and inaction are inconsistent with the training and protocols of our profession and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I can assure you that Metro will strive each day to continue to build your trust.
You know, and it just it struck me too, Tricia, that we should mention that obviously there is a lot of frustration and a lot of anger here among the protesters. But what we've seen so far is by the most part an act of civil disobedience, but one that's been peaceful. And we've seen a couple arrests right now. Jackie mentioned she saw maybe at least one Metro unit that was vandalized, that was spray painted. But other than that, we're not hearing any reports of any kind of violence or any kind of property damage. And also conversely, we need to also mention obviously the officers and the remarkable professionalism that they are also showing in the heat of this frustration. That let's not forget the focus of this whole epicenter of this is in Minneapolis, you know, and yet these officers there we see are taking the brunt of some of the local anger and pent-up frustration and handling themselves quite remarkably, quite restrained, and keeping things in order and keeping things peaceful. And let's hope things will, you know, continue along these lines until finally this crowd feels like, you know, they've made their point. They've gotten the attention of people here in Southern Nevada, and they feel somewhat relieved that they could express their personal level of deep anger and deep frustration over what we saw play out in Minnesota.
Well said, Todd. And I want to add that the media staging area is going to be there near Fashion Show Mall, and we understand that Metro may be prepared to speak soon or give us a statement. So that's interesting that they will be possibly speaking or giving us the latest on possibly how many people arrested and exactly what for and what they've found. So that could be coming in moments as well. But yes, absolutely. Today here in Las Vegas, from what it appears from our coverage, we've only seen a handful of arrests. Overall, I would say a peaceful demonstration. We don't know in terms of damage at this time, but I'm sure Metro will give us a full assessment. And again, you're seeing the face-to-face demonstration here. Pictures say 1,000 words, and that right there says a lot as Metro officers face the Black Lives Matter protesters with their signs.
And I could tell you, in covering protests from Black Lives Matter in Philadelphia 5-6 years ago, and being out in similar scenes, I can't really underestimate the emotionally charged atmosphere of situations like this. And again, it's a nod to the professionalism of the Metro Police Department that we're seeing them stand there and take the brunt of people shouting at them. I mean, these officers, they're human beings as well. They're husbands, their wives, their brothers, their sisters that live in our community who had nothing to do with what happened in Minnesota, but yet part of their job requirement means that they have to sit there and essentially take the brunt of this emotionally charged atmosphere, and they're doing so professionally right now. And it's not an easy task, but this is something that they train for over and over again, and we're watching that training play out on live television right here in our community.
Absolutely, Anybody who has seen the video, it's of George Floyd, it is highly disturbing, and you can understand, the sentiment and the concern, and people have the right to protest peacefully across America. And it's good to see overall here in Las Vegas the approach here, as I would agree, Todd, on Metro's half and our protesters here as well. And there again, you're seeing to the right of your screen. The strong stance on both sides here of, Metro standing strong with the protesters, and it's their right to be out and protest.
Yeah, and we should also, mention sort of in the backdrop of all of this is obviously the pandemic and the fact that the Strip is essentially still, shut down in terms of the casinos haven't reopened. And so we're watching this all play out in a world where we're dealing with this pandemic, but that's also meant that there's less traffic, there are less cars right now on the boulevard, and there are also a lot less people on the Strip right now than there would normally be under normal circumstances, especially on a Friday night in a summer in Las Vegas.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that adds to the fact that we have far less people on the Las Vegas Strip. It is a Friday night on the Las Vegas Strip, and this is not a large crowd, obviously, for a Friday night on the Las Vegas Strip, and I think it leads to the calm as well. So normally people don't have this kind of access to that corner to make a statement, and so this is something, first of all, A, we've never seen the Strip shut down for 2.5 months, and B, we've never seen a demonstration on the Las Vegas Strip with this kind of room and lack of crowds. And
and I'm curious right now, Tricia, and I don't know if any of our producers can chime in who have access to our traffic cameras, and even if Chopper 13, if Jason's up in Chopper 13, can give us maybe a wider view. Is this crowd that we're seeing in front of a fashion show right now, to the best of our knowledge, is this the largest crowd that we are seeing? I believe that this is it. And Joe Bartel's talked about the size of the crowd overall that he saw walk past him just about maybe an hour and a half ago. And Joe described that crowd of being roughly 500 to 700 people. And so just, compare that to what the crowd we're seeing right now in front of the fashion show mall. I think this is the largest crowd that we are seeing. And thank you, Jason, for that. Again, that wide shot from Chopper 13. So that gives you some sense of it. It appears that we are at the tail end of this and that the crowd is dispersing and that this is beginning to taper off. But that's, again, from our sort of limited view from what we could see right now. But that appears to be the indication. Tricia, are you getting that sense as well?
Todd, I am getting that sense. I think this is the end of the demonstration today, and a lot of the protesters have gone home at this time. Again, it started at 5 o'clock, and from what Joe said, he saw between 500 to 700 people, and now, of course, we're seeing, I'd say maybe 70 people, high end at the most. So the scene is closing down. Metro's getting ready to brief, obviously, on what's happened today, but I think that that's what we're seeing right now. There is a small crowd left. It almost looks as, from this picture, that there's just as many officers out there, if not more, than the protesters at this point.
And I'm wondering, do we still have Joe Bartels? Joe, are you still with us? Can you give us from your vantage point what you're seeing right now compared to what we just saw maybe 45 minutes ago?
Yeah, Todd, Tricia, it's a lot calmer now. We're not seeing nearly as many folks out and about, and we see police kind of standing at more of a relaxed posture as more of being at an attentive posture. One thing that I did see just moments ago, and Rudy Garcia, my photographer, kind of pointed out, we saw a security guard kind of quickly move out of the Cromwell, motion to one of the officers, and then we saw a couple of units kind of quickly make their way around the Cromwell, and we saw a couple of units go inside the casino as well. So I'm not exactly sure if there's a situation there or if they needed police attention inside, but it looked like a number of Metro officers kind of went between the Cromwell and the Flamingo, which is just to the north of the Cromwell, and then a couple of units go inside there. You can see the folks, the police there kind of in a line, so to speak, and some more more folks here kind of just watching and waiting to see what happens. Rudy, if you'll go back and show at the corner of Bally's right there at Las Vegas Boulevard, Flamingo, that same group of folks really hasn't changed in terms of size or posture. They're still there within feet of police, but there's not really any taunting back and forth, no escalation, no real movement either way on either side. One of the things that I wanted to point out is that I don't know if this is going to be moving towards a faster resolution. I think that right now police are content with maybe holding the line at this moment and not escalating things any further, and they're okay with the protesters at the moment. But quickly the sun is going down, and so far no violence, no damage that we're aware of. Again, we're waiting any second now. My colleague Jackie Kostek is now rushing from her previous location over to that media staging area, where we do expect someone from, I would imagine, upper command staff, perhaps an assistant sheriff, will address the media, give us an update on perhaps arrests, injuries, those kinds of things. We mentioned earlier in this broadcast, as we kind of went commercial free here, I've seen officers from every corner of the valley. I can see on the vehicles here, there's folks from the northeast area of town and the Northeast Area Command, Enterprise, which is in the southwest, Bolden, Northwest, all those, the Bolden is kind of in the central part of Las Vegas, all converging here to bolster the police presence and kind of show a use, a force, if you will, of numbers and sheer size as opposed to any other means that they have at their disposal as well. This is quiet now at Flamingo Las Vegas Boulevard, but as we've seen, there's folks that kind of come and go, and we're just kind of waiting and watching. Todd.
And Joe, I'm curious, when you and Rudy saw, I believe at least one or two protesters get arrested, and you've sort of had time to sort of collect your thoughts. As best you can tell, were they arrested, or at least I should say detained, to be more accurate? Were they detained because it appears that they just weren't dispersing and they weren't listening, or was there any other indication that they may have been detained for any other reason?
No, I didn't see any objects being thrown or assault or any of things along those, lines, using a weapon or hands or whatever on a police officer. As best as I could tell, the one female that I saw that got detained, she was holding up a sign, standing right in the middle of the road after we heard the police multiple times saying disperse and leave immediately. So that would be obstructing the traffic or something along those lines, not perhaps a more serious assault charge or something along those lines. I only saw one person. Rudy's got the zoom lens on his camera, so he can see a lot closer and a lot tighter than I can. I just saw the one person, but perhaps there was multiple people that were detained at least. And as I kind of look just surveying this area here, you just see the sea of flashing lights as we just kind of take stock and gravity of the situation here. Police are watching carefully, but we don't see them in a kind of an agitated or a state of being at attention. I can now hear folks back at that group, Rudy, I can hear them now starting to chant just a little bit louder. The sign says I can't breathe, and people kind of getting a little bit more riled up as time goes on, but it is very hot. The sun going down quickly, that's certainly a factor in this police response, and maybe wanting to hold this line longer and seeing what transpires. One other quick thing I wanted to point out, that of course all of this is taking in the backdrop of phase 2. Today, Nevada was opening up a new chapter of reopening after this pandemic. Bars and all sorts of different industries were reopening. So all across this city, with the backdrop of what's going on in the world famous Strip, we have life getting back to some sense of normalcy. But as you mentioned, in the backdrop of the pandemic and what happened nationally, you cannot ignore what is going on. And we also had the Culinary Union out here and having their voice heard and their concerns about their safety as thousands of people repopulate the Strip. They're back to work on June 4th as many, if not all of these properties are back open. They have their concerns as well. They want to be safe. I see a car just drove by, a yellow sign says, "Don't gamble with workers' lives." They certainly want to have their voices heard as well, but kind of a combination of you can hear some horns, but not nearly as many, but just kind of a confluence of different voices and demonstrations coming together all at once here on the famous Las Vegas Strip, and we will continue monitoring to what goes on. And I am watching, listening carefully on Twitter and on social media, and folks are asking what's going on, and you know, Las Vegas has this international posture, so we're certainly all eyes on Las Vegas, Joe, typically, but even more so when you have something like this happening, guys.
Joe, I have a quick question for you, and I was just wondering, have you seen any? Obviously, Trump Hotel is not too far, and the president obviously has come under fire for his tweet that's been reported. Have you seen any of these crowds, or are there any protests outside of Donald Trump's hotel in Las Vegas at all? And I don't know if you can even see that from your vantage point, but are any of the protesters, have they made their way past that hotel today at all?
Well, we saw all those folks, 500 to 700 or so by my estimation, move up in that direction. We know that according to what we've seen from Chopper 13, as well as my folks back at the station and my producers kind of texting me and letting me know updates, because we don't have the luxury of seeing what's going on TV right from where I can hear you, but I can't see what's going on. We understand that there was quite a large presence of folks that were up towards that direction. We know the media staging area is right off a fashion show and Sammy Davis Jr. Drive. That's on the backside of a fashion show, so that's within, you can see it's right in the shadows of Trump Tower there. Certainly, not to get too political, but the president's tweets have certainly not sat well with a lot of folks, and so it wouldn't be much of an imagination or stretch of imagination as folks want to just demonstrate in front of the building that bears the president's name here in Las Vegas, a very conspicuous, very noticeable tower. And certainly folks directing some of their maybe displeasure. I haven't seen any anti-president or Trump signs, and I haven't seen any other counter protests as well. Typically, I've seen some folks who are maybe counter protesting or want to show their support for different viewpoints. I have not seen that as of yet, but Rudy, if you guys are on our shot, I can see
and Joe,
folks there. More of them
Joe,
gathered.
Hey Joe, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to let you know that the crowd that we saw in front of a fashion show right now continues to walk, I believe, if my sense of direction is correct, south. And I'm wondering, where are you? South of? You are south of the Fashion Show Mall?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just walking. I'm just trying to get, I'm sorry, the microphone might lose reception here, but I'm just kind of poking my head out now on Las Vegas Boulevard. We are on Flamingo, so everything that's going on is going to be the north of where we're at. So we're south of here. So if the folks are marching in a south direction, we'll probably be seeing them before short order as it kind of, Las Vegas Boulevard kind of curves and heads more of a north-south direction as opposed to kind of curving off to the maybe north and east as well. So the strip kind of straightens out, and then I'll have a clear shot to see if folks are coming this way. But if they're heading to the south, they're going to be coming towards my direction here in moments.
Yeah, it appears that they are at the intersection right now of the Strip and Spring Mountain, if I do correct. And it looks like they are all, as they enter this intersection, they're dispersing a little bit, but they seem to still be walking walking south. Am I correct in seeing that, Tricia? You keep me honest here,
right by
too,
Treasure.
What you see,
they're right by Treasure Island right now.
Right.
I believe. Yeah, and it does look like it's thinning out and less of a movement, if you will, at this time. As we said, this is now going on 2 hours that they've, when Joe started broadcasting at the top of the 5, and there was between 500 to 700 people, as he estimates, and so the crowd has thinned out quite a bit, as you can see. But this is what's left of the Black Lives Matter march on the Las Vegas Strip today. And from what I understand, we're also getting ready to hear from Metro. We don't know exactly what time we'll hear from Metro, but they're setting up a staging area for the media, so we can find out the very latest on what transpired today at the height, obviously, of this movement here. And as you can see, the crowd is thinning out. Still some with a flag and some signs still, but it's definitely thinning out the Black Lives Matter march of today.
Yeah, so we saw this demonstration unfold beginning right at 5 o'clock, and we saw the emotions, we saw the anger, and we saw the outrage, really, that so many Americans felt in watching that video and watching literally on camera George Floyd lose his life. And we saw that outrage spark last night in Minnesota. And we're seeing movements and protests like this throughout the country today. And Las Vegas is no exception. People seeing that video are horrified by what they saw, and it expressed to them a sense of a lack of justice and a lack of being counted and being accounted for. And we saw that emotion playing out right now on the Las Vegas Boulevard. But as we've been mentioning, right now that crowd has dispersed. It is thinned out. There again, we see that traffic camera. If you've been paying attention to our coverage for the past hour or so, you've watched it as we have in real time and live events unfold as that crowd gathered there, and now it has moved on. So we'll see how Metro now responds to this crowd as it continues to make its way south towards where Joe is. And Joe, I see you on one of our preview monitors. Can you see them right now from your viewpoint?
Todd, I just looked beyond the view of the camera here. I kind of ran over and kind of got a clear shot down Las Vegas Boulevard. I cannot see anyone coming this way just as of yet, but just moments ago, within the past 30 seconds or so, I heard police kind of shouting amongst themselves, and now they've formed this line. They've come on the other side of the cruisers, and now they've got a solid line here. You can see them wearing their tactical uniforms. They've got their protective equipment on, their helmets on, so they are ready. So clearly what we're seeing from Chopper 13, what you're reporting and what you're seeing right now, they know, and they're getting reports, of course, from officers up the road on Las Vegas Boulevard, as well as the crime cameras, and I would imagine their counterterrorism office monitoring the cameras, are aware of the movements and giving these officers the advance notice saying, hey, we've got movement now moving your direction, be ready. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. My sources are telling me that Assistant Sheriff Kevin McMahill would be, I believe, second in command at Metro Police, is on scene. I would imagine he may be giving the briefing. We've seen him a number of times of very high intensity, critical incidents, as the police call them, officer-involved shootings or other things like that. So we'd imagine someone from Metro Police upper command staff will be coming out and addressing the media, answering questions in terms of injuries, heat-related arrests, all sorts of different things as well. I'm just kind of, there's a chopper flying overhead. I'm not sure if that's law enforcement or not. But we have seen a lot of air units. I know we got Chopper 13 high above us as well. I saw Metro's air unit a little bit ago. I haven't seen it in a while now. But a lot of the work now on the ground, trying to set up containment areas and just keeping an eye on folks, making sure that everyone stays safe. The main reason to keep people safe, but also protect properties and damage as well. One of the things that we've seen, and I don't want to take away from this scene right here, Rudy, but you can see just up on the pedestrian bridge right there, you can see the boarded up window there of the Bellagio, and that's what we've seen at several of the properties. Because they're closed and because casinos typically never close, that they've put up plywood and things like that to keep these properties safe. So we've seen the Bellagio, for example, this was because of COVID-19 and the prolonged shutdown, but just a sense that if there were to be an escalation of perhaps violence or the appetite for maybe destruction or otherwise, these casinos have essentially been fortified. Rudy, you can go back and show the folks at the police line here. But these properties are fortified. They've been watched. They've been carefully watched. They've been emptied for a prolonged period of time. Security has been in them. So that is certainly something that they've been watching carefully. And that, like I mentioned earlier when we were broadcasting live around the 5 or 6, that would certainly add a layer of complication if these properties were open or if this was business as usual. Certainly we'd be talking about certainly a much different scenario, guys.
Absolutely, Joe. And Overall, we'll find out from Metro. Again, Joe, you know, we know how it goes with Metro. They set up a staging area, but it could be 9 o'clock before we hear from Metro tonight. Do we have any idea? Does your source have any idea of what time we could possibly hear? Because it looks like the crowd is dispersing. And this started again over 2 hours now. At the height, we had between 500 to 700, as you estimated. And so I'm sure we'll get the final details from Metro this evening.
Yeah, and Trisha, we're just
I've not
watching
heard of
this crowd
timeline.
again.
Sorry, Todd, I just want to talk to you really quick. I just was going to mention that typically, you know, Metro Police does for the most part a good job of keeping us informed and letting us know what's going on. They want to give the most accurate information as well. So when you have these many working parts and units, it takes a while perhaps to aggregate or get all of that information together to then compile it and bring, you know, the most accurate information as possible. So that's what I anticipate is going on right now. And with critical incidents like this, we've seen Metro Police act with the swiftness. And for example, the shooting at the fashion show some number of months ago, police were very quick and came out and addressed the media and kind of gave us a very quick overview of what's going on. They'll probably give us just preliminary information as things develop, and certainly this is the developing situation, so that's what I expect to be happening in the very near future.
Okay, Todd, you were going to say?
No, excuse me, Joe. I know you're responding. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just saying what we're seeing on Chopper right now, again, is this relatively small crowd of what was left of the original protesters now continuing to make its way south on the Strip, passing by Treasure Island and Mirage right now. And we're seeing some of them splinter off as they go down. You see some leaving on some side streets right now. And so my question ultimately is, and I know we don't have an answer to this, is what is the end game for this crowd? I know this protest started at right around 5 o'clock as far as it actually taking the march to the Las Vegas Boulevard. But I'm curious to now as to see this crowd as it heads south as to how much longer this will continue. I think at this point right now it is evident that they have had their voices heard. They have made their case, and I don't know what else there is left for them to do.
Yeah, I agree. They're still making the case as they walk south on Las Vegas Boulevard with their signs, and they continue down Las Vegas Boulevard. Again, a Friday night. It's really unusual to see anything like this. You know, there's about, I'd say, maybe as they pull out, there's a little bit, I don't know, would you say, Todd, 70 to 100 people still out there? Maybe not?
Yeah, it's always hard to give a definitive number, but people see it with their eye, right? I would say it could be anywhere from the 50 to 80 range, but this is what we've seen. This is what we've seen so far as far as the leftover crowd from the larger group of protesters that were out there about an hour and a half ago, and this is what's left. And again, it's been an act of somewhat of a civil disobedience, but it's been largely peaceful. People have voiced their concerns and their anger and their frustration. Metro Police has been here every step of the way. We saw them react very quickly and very aggressively once the crowd began to march on the Strip, aggressively in terms of their numbers and the number of officers that were then responding to the scene. But for the most part, this crowd has been peaceful. Metro officers have been there to keep the peace and make sure things stay that way. We've seen this crowd get in the face of some Metro officers. But to the best of our knowledge, we don't see any evidence of anyone throwing any kind of rocks or bottles or any kind of debris and taking part in any sort of wide-scale property damage as we've seen in other protests across the country. So I think that is something that all of us here in Southern Nevada can take to heart, and to realize that, you know, there is a big segment of our population right now who feels absolutely outraged by what they saw in Minnesota, outraged to the point where they felt like they needed to publicly take a stance, and that's what we're seeing play out here. But we're watching them do so peacefully, and we're watching, again, the professionalism of the police department as, again, these are the men and women who serve in this uniform. They're our friends, they're our neighbors, they're in some cases, our relatives.
Yeah.
But they have a job to do, and tonight we're watching them do that job remarkably well.
Well, I think it's very telling that the cars were allowed back on the strip behind the crowd, as you saw in that one picture. That says it all. That right there, that shot says that this is coming to an end because the cars are moving the crowds forward to the officers, and it will disperse. The strip is no longer open to the protests. They're opening it up back to traffic, which pretty much tells the story right now that this is coming to an end for the evening. That's how I take that. Todd?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's a reason also, too, that Metro would open up that stretch of the strip to cars, because that's also one sort of direct way of making sure the crowd continues to disperse, and so that they're not going to turn back around and go and head back up into that line of cars for a number of reasons, for their own safety, and also because I'm sure they have no reason to want to scare or frighten any of those civilians who are traveling down the strip right now. So that could be a police tactic that we're seeing play out right in front of our eyes right now in live television.
Absolutely. And again, it's been a peaceful end to this march. They'll be coming up right here to Las Vegas Boulevard and Wynn. They'll be coming up to these officers, I believe, here. And we just lost our shot. But yeah, they're opening up the strip again to traffic right there in that shot, right behind these protesters of Black Lives Matter today. Again, one of hundreds of protests that have gone on across the country today, throughout America, for the last 4 days, really. We've seen this. We had a protest last night, and again, one that started at 5 o'clock today, and this is the remnants of that protest from Black Lives Matter. Todd.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Tricia, too, about the timing of all of this, and as far as when these protests were organized, because we have to keep in mind, too, the events that occurred today directly related to the George Floyd matter, and that we began the day. Many people across the country, and if not across the world, really were pondering why an arrest wasn't made. What other kind of evidence could investigators need? And I think from our observations, right, that we've been monitoring the news the past several days, we've seen that as really being the key flashpoint for so many for so much of the emotions surrounding the story, and people saying, what else needs to happen for a police officer to be arrested than to what we saw with George Floyd, and we watched that officer on his neck for almost 8 minutes. And for just over 8 minutes, 8 minutes and 23 seconds, I believe. And today we also learned that approximately almost 2 minutes of that time, Mr. Floyd was absolutely unresponsive. So you have that in the background here of when this protest was probably organized and people's outrage that there wasn't an arrest. And so I'm just curious as to, now that there has been one arrest and the prosecutor mentioned that he did believe more arrests were coming, alluding to those 3 other officers, I'm just curious as to how that will play out and what kind of impact that will have on any further planned protests or thoughts of protests here in the Valley.
Right. And, the other thing is, I saw the video one time. I could not watch it again. It's very difficult to watch that, as I can't breathe, and that situation is just awful. And a lot of the protesters, a lot of people I've been hearing from on social media and just reading the comments, a lot of people aren't happy with the charges of 3rd-degree murder. They believe it should be harsher. And and that the other officers, nobody stepped in to say anything. So that's led to this outrage as well, Todd. And the fact that it took this long to face charges has led to that. That's a very interesting picture there, too. Gives you a different perspective with the traffic coming behind these protesters.
Right, and you can see again with these protesters, they've shown through the course of the now going on more than 2 hours that we've been watching them. It is clear they have no intent to really do any kind of widespread damage or cause any problems or vandalize any part of our community. And so we're again watching that play out right now on live television.
Yeah, let's
and
go.
Joe,
Yeah.
I'm being told you can begin to see some of these protesters from your vantage point.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that you talked about the protesters moving. We can now hear Metro's air unit high above doing orbits, and I poked my head out, and here they come. Dynamic situation now kind of formulating here. You can see the folks walking down Las Vegas Boulevard here, about half the distance now between I would say Caesar's Palace and maybe Flamingo now. And then, Rudy, if you spin around very quickly here, we now have this line of officers that have now advanced towards us here right now, live here on 13 Action News. I can hear officers kind of shouting commands at the other folks, the rank and file, telling you to fan out, spread out now about shoulder length or so apart, and they're creating a line now, looks like, from the fence here. Rudy, if you just pan all the way to the right here, we have them right here, and then all the way across. So this might be another place where they draw their line in the sand and say, nobody past this line here, and trying to kind of pinch, like we saw earlier, these groups together and then get them to disperse. This is an enormous area to try and contain and to get some kind of control, because it's just the sheer size of it is huge. Metro Police, of course, very good with handling crowds. Rudy, if you want to spin around and show the folks here, they've now stopped. They've now stopped their movement now southbound, and looks like they've kind of congregated all together in the center of Las Vegas Boulevard here. We'll see what happens. They were on the move this way, and then as I was speaking here, they've now stopped. Perhaps they see this line of officers, and now it's what happens next. Do they move towards officers? Do we move towards a confrontation? Do they disperse? I would imagine just in the posturing now, looks like, Rudy, if you spin back around, sorry. Don't mean to keep doing this to you, but now they've kind of fanned out here, and I would imagine they may be trying to clear folks out. So this is, we're now seeing some different things that we haven't seen before now. Police doing more of a posture, more of a line, and trying to maybe get more of a containment. So we'll see what happens. And so we see folks kind of getting some folks here out that were just kind of maybe sitting on the Caesar's fountain and just kind of watching what was going on. Now they're trying to get spectators out here. We'll see if they ask us to move as well. And to the left, Rudy, if you show those folks that have been kind of showing in our shot there on the corner of Flamingo and Las Vegas Boulevard. The size of crowd maybe grown a little bit. We see some folks up on the pedestrian bridge as well, signs, but no movement towards the police, and no police movement towards the folks that have gathered here. So we are carefully watching. Oh, and this, Rudy, I'm so sorry, guys, if you're on our shot here, but now there's vehicles driving amongst the protesters. This is. Yeah,
it appears, Joe, that they opened it up to traffic, and that's what's behind the protesters.
Oh no. Okay. So this is, the traffic is stopped, slowed. I hope for everyone's safety here, but you can hear there's some horn honking and signs, and I'm not sure where these folks are from, if they're still leftovers from the Culinary Union, or if they're now supporters that have joined the movement here. This is going to get very, we'll see what happens here, guys.
Yeah, we've noticed before these cars, Joe, just so you know, leading up to your position, we've watched this line of cars follow the group of protesters as they have made their way south down the boulevard. So it is these protesters who then stopped, and obviously the cars that want to continue. That's kind of what we're seeing sort of play out right now. But I don't know, are they part of, as best as you can tell, the signs that are people in these cars are holding? Are they part of the Black Lives Matter protest, or perhaps are these people still from the Culinary Union, Joe? I don't know if you can see their signs, and I believe, Tricia,
yeah, I can hear you guys. We're sorry.
Right?
Can you see?
We're moving up to the safety of the pedestrian bridge to see as this kind of moves towards us. We're moving up the escalator right now, and here we go. Police are not moving, and we now have folks moving towards us here.
Can you read some of the signs? Are these part of the movement, or is this just Culinary Union or regular traffic here? Some of the signs from the cars.
This is I see Black Lives Matter, it looks like. No justice, no peace, they're shouting. I see banners to that effect, I can't breathe. A number of people. So this is here. So the first protesters, once Rudy spins around here, and if you're taking our shot right now, you can see this is the line that police have drawn here on perhaps one of the most busy and well-known intersections in perhaps the entire world, Las Vegas Boulevard at Flamingo. This is the moment perhaps that this was building to. We will see what happens. Rudy is trying to get his shot up as fast as possible here, but you can see protesters on one side, Las Vegas police on the other, a sea of police cars and police lights. Police are in their tactical vest, gear, helmets, and we will see how this plays out. But police have been working to contain this group here for the better part of a couple of hours.
Yeah, and Joe, so we see from Chopper, and it's hard to sort of piece together from our vantage point, but you tell us, and we see there officers directing the protesters. Are they pointing them in the direction of down Flamingo? In other words, all off the strip? It appears that Metro officers have said, enough when it comes to these protesters walking on the strip. That's what I'm seeing right now. Is that kind of what you're seeing at this point?
Yeah, so we can see that line of officers. If you got Rudy shot up, I know we're kind of shooting through the plexiglass here of the pedestrian bridge kind of higher up, but we saw officers, you can kind of see them every once in a while gesturing to go east. So that would be away from I-15, down Flamingo, maybe towards Koval, towards, I think it's Link Boulevard now, and maybe Koval. So that's the direction some folks, it looks like they're trying to move them towards. I'm not sure what direction is or what's at that point. Okay, so now we have looks like protesters are now face to face with some of the officers. The shields have now come down on some of them, and the protesters are within arm's reach or so of police. So we will see kind of what the situation is. You can hear some of the folks that are out here demonstrating. I've also seen it's out of the camera's view, but just to the right of this on kind of Las Vegas, on Flamingo, is the paddy wagon. It looks like a bus, a white bus. So Rudy, you can't see it, but I can see it, kind of a shade of it.
And hey, Joe, I don't know if you can hear me. Hey, Joe, if I can interrupt you for a second. And Joe, yeah, I don't know if it's the same white bus that we saw before, but we saw with the confrontation, not the confrontation, the standoff that happened by the Fashion Show Mall, is we saw a number of Metro officers were inside a large white bus, and that bus pulled up to the scene, and we saw a couple dozen Metro police officers spill out of that bus, and I don't know if that is the same bus that you're seeing. Can you see? Is there anyone that's in that bus?
No, Todd, I wasn't able to see anyone that's inside the bus. They have pretty dark-tinted windows. They have the bars on there for transporting inmates and other folks who are in custody and under arrest. So I didn't see anyone get off the bus. I haven't seen anyone get loaded onto the bus, and I haven't seen any personnel kind of come off that bus. So now we have folks, they're chanting, "No justice, no peace." You mentioned, you were asking if any of the Culinary Union members have joined this. Rudy, there's a red SUV just on the other side of that handrail. You can see Local 720, so they have some union representation out here as well. I haven't seen, because the local Culinary Union is 226, so this is maybe a different union showing some support. They obviously have it on their vehicle there. But now kind of a stalemate. The protesters have moved southbound, now in the very center of Flamingo and Las Vegas Boulevard, face to face with police, and we will see what happens. I can hear them chanting, "No justice, no peace," holding signs, and we are just watching this to see what happens. But the protesters are not being allowed to move any closer or farther away from us on Las Vegas Boulevard. There's a contingent of police officers. Beyond that, they have their police cruisers all tactically lined up together, almost bumper to bumper. So to thin the crowd, they won't be able to move maybe en masse as much. But this is certainly an iconic photo here on the famous Las Vegas Strip in the shadows of all the major hotels and the Eiffel Tower. We have folks here demonstrating their frustration, their anger over what's happening nationally, coming here to Las Vegas, guys.
All right, Joe, and I'm just curious, do you think all those cars right behind this group are part of this demonstration, or is this actual traffic that's trying to get through? Or are these just all supporters in the cars behind them?
Yeah, so Tricia, I was seeing, because I believe police have the road shut down, so these appear to be supporters. I don't believe that these are motorists who are stranded or stuck necessarily. I would imagine if they were, I hear a lot more horn honking, a lot more frustration, and maybe some agitation as well. So you see some folks there, that blue Fusion, a guy is now out of his car holding up, looks like a phone perhaps, documenting this. So to me, at least right here, this looks like this is going to be supporters perhaps. They're not in any hurry to move along or honking their horns or anything like that. And now you're seeing some folks kind of in the back of this, right in front of that red SUV, Rudy, if you can show, they're now kneeling on one knee. We did see this yesterday. I was covering the demonstration that they had organized that walked from the MGM down to South Central Area Command. That's that police substation right by the Welcome to Las Vegas sign, if you're familiar with it. And during that gathering, the folks who were there, I would say there's probably 50 or so, or maybe 100. They got down on both knees or one knee, and they timed it, and they counted down to 7 minutes. And that was the time that they determined was the amount of time that George Floyd was on the ground with that officer, that Minnesota officer who's now under arrest and being charged with third-degree murder, had his knee to the back of the neck of George Floyd for 7 minutes. A symbolic gesture showing honor to the man that lost his life, but a very visual way to show their displeasure with the situation, guys.
Yeah, and
all right, Joe, we do have Jackie Kostick right now. She's rejoining us, and Jackie, I understand you are near the area of Harmon in the Strip. Is that correct?
Yeah, Todd, that's exactly right. We are at Harmon and Las Vegas Boulevard right now. And just a couple hours ago, this place was packed with protesters that they had come south from Circus Circus. They turned around, they were making their way back north. And now it sounds like they're kind of going back and forth a little bit on the Strip. But just to build some context into what we've seen over the last couple hours, these protesters, many of them have been out here since about 1:30 this afternoon. That protest kicked off at 2 o'clock on the dot right in front of the Bellagio, but there were protesters that gathered around 1:30 in front of the Miracle Mile shops. And so they have been walking up and down the Strip for several hours now. They made their way all the way up to Circus Circus, chanting, showing off their signs. And they up at Circus Circus, they spent some time chanting, playing music, and then they started making their way back. And down here right now, we've seen a couple scattered groups of folks still with their signs out, heading home for the evening. So there are definitely people that are, making their way home after looks like hours on the Strip of making their voices heard. But we spoke to several people earlier about what today is all about here in Las Vegas, and obviously it points back to what has been happening in Minneapolis all week long. You've been seeing the riots and the demonstrators out in Minneapolis, and that's all because of the death of George Floyd. And I spoke to several protesters earlier today who said that, even after they saw the officer be charged with third-degree murder, that was not enough for them. They are really demanding justice for much more. They want to see all 4 officers be charged with murder in that case. So far, as we've seen today, it's just the one officer who we saw kneeling on George Floyd, which ultimately did kill him. And they want to see all of these injustices brought to light, and they're making their voices heard tonight on the Las Vegas Strip. So,
and Jackie,
again, it's fairly calm where we are right now. Yes, Tricia.
It's good news that we're hearing right now that Metro wants to make a statement regarding the protest on the Las Vegas Strip today, and we've been wanting to hear from Metro, so we know that that's going to be coming momentarily. So go ahead. As you were saying, it looks like the crowd is dispersing as well as we're watching here.
Yeah, like I said, we've seen a few small groups of protesters making their way down the escalators and sort of off of the main Strip area right now. As you can see, Harmon between Las Vegas Boulevard between Harmon and the Bellagio still blocked off all the way north, I think, to where
All
Joe
right, Jackie,
is,
we want to get to
right
Joe.
now,
We want to get to Joe Bartels right now, I'm being told. Joe?
Yeah, guys, within the last 15, 20 seconds, a real escalation here now. The protesters now coming face to face. We just now heard the bullhorn now instructing people to disperse. There is a line that is now converging from the north to the south. I had Rudy showing it just a little bit ago, but now there looks like they may be underneath the pedestrian bridge right here. So now there's two lines of Metro Police from one end of the strip to the other now, converging and tightening this group of folks that have now gathered at Las Vegas Boulevard in Flamingo. Just seconds ago, as Jackie was talking, I heard kind of a roar from the crowd, and there was some confusion, it looks like. There's now vehicles that are nearby, which is rather dangerous for the police officers as well, right there, as well as the protesters that have kind of gathered there. So, hope the vehicles are, not going to do anything that's going to injure anybody, but that's certainly a concern. I can hear folks right now. I can hear the loud speaker instructing people to disperse and to leave immediately. That line of folks now kind of on one side, Metro continuing to hold that line to make sure no one kind of gets around them or behind them. That would be incredibly dangerous as a tactical position. And I know, Rudy, what we call is off the shoulder right now. I see somebody right in the center of that line, that police cruiser. Someone is being in custody. Someone's in cuffs right now, a white shirt. It looks like. So this is certainly perhaps the escalation that we have, I guess, haven't seen up to this point.
Well, Joe,
I'm
it's
listening
funny.
right now.
We
it sounds like
see
they're telling
this
them
being
to
playing out
disperse.
right now from.
Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Joe. Yeah, it does appear that, again, Metro warning the crowd to disperse, but just to sort of give you some context before we were talking about what was happening at the Fashion Show Mall. I know, you couldn't see what we were seeing, but we saw a similar scene being played out right there at the Fashion Show Mall. And at that point, that appeared to be an even larger crowd than what we're seeing right now. So if experience tells us anything, it is an indication that this crowd will voice their anger and continue to voice their frustration and get almost right up in the face of many of these officers, but then they will disperse peacefully and move on. So let's hope in that context, history will repeat itself.
And Todd, as you kind of mentioned all of that, here's that line that I was referencing just seconds ago, coming up from now the north to the south, and now the two lines of Metro Police now converging, walking around these vehicles, and we have other folks as well, and we will see what happens. These protesters now surrounded on both sides, now being funneled, and we can see some folks now jumping over the fence of the Cromwell, and kind of getting off the roadway, and here we go. There's we see someone being taken down right now. We have okay, so now we have officers now in kind of a defensive motion here, grabbing people. This certainly is now escalating the crowd, and there's now more people walking up. They're seeing what's happening, and now I think I just saw an item thrown. This is certainly getting. I just saw an item now thrown from the protesters towards police. And we're seeing police now starting to grab people. I see people running. I see someone grab looks like a baton of some sort, starting to, this is certainly escalating to the point that we haven't seen before. We have a sign down on the ground. We see people getting pushed, police pushing some individuals as they get close, as the officers move in to try and looks like take someone into custody. But this is certainly, just saw another item thrown, looks like a water bottle, another water bottle being thrown at officers. It looks like it just made contact with the officers in the back line. And now officers here are telling those vehicles that were behind the protesters, now get out of the way. Those vehicles are now leaving the area on Flamingo on Las Vegas Boulevard.
And Joe, and clearly the police there, they have communicated to this crowd essentially that they have had enough with this crowd, at least being on Las Vegas Boulevard, and have asked them to leave. And I guess what we're seeing right now is that sort of standoff playing out, that despite the officers' clear verbal warnings, this crowd at this point, at least a good chunk of the crowd is staying put. It looks like from our vantage point, maybe 50, 60 people. Is that about right? Is that about the numbers you're seeing?
Yeah, I would say it's hard to tell from our vantage point, but there's more people that have kind of funneled down on Flamingo. So I would say the crowd size is probably upwards of 100, maybe a bit more. But you have all the the folks there in the SUV that's kind of right there, stuck in the middle, and all the from our vantage point. Oh, we have Metro running towards the crowd, and folks dispersing. We have someone being taken into custody. As we watch these live pictures on KTNV Channel 13, if you're just joining us, this line of protesters have been moving. Look, we have another person being challenging police officers, now being thrown to the ground. We saw that woman, that female, challenge officers, push the officer, and they've now taken her. They're dragging her across Las Vegas Boulevard on Flamingo. And we see people gesturing to maybe that red SUV, the driver of that SUV. I'm not sure what that's about. But just in front of that SUV and kind of out of our vantage point, we saw that group of officers rush towards the protesters. They kind of scattered, and then officers grab one or two people out of the crowd, maybe one of the people that are the most vocal or maybe the people they can grab. They take them into custody, then they drag them out, and then the protesters then turn around, stand their ground, and now challenging officers, shouting, it looks like, holding up signs, making gestures, very animated. Police on the other side holding the line, not moving backwards, but also not advancing. So we're watching this very carefully. It looks like they may be gearing up to do that again. It looks like a tactic that they use. So that's kind of what we're seeing.
And Joe,
Rudy, if you can, maybe get back on your tripod, guys.
We saw that same tactic being used at the Fashion Show Mall, where again, the officers drew a very clear, distinct line, and then you had another group of officers, maybe 8 or 9 officers, sort of form a group behind that line. The officers then suddenly open up their line, so that second group of officers then broke through the line, and they either tried to scare away the crowd, or in this case, we saw them, it appeared that they did grab at least one protester and detained that protester.
Yeah.
Is that what you saw, Joe? Or go ahead, Tricia. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I saw, and typically we saw this with maybe the mounted unit, their horseback unit. They would ride their horses and try to corral people and disperse them. But in the absence of that, they're using their 2 feet, and I can hear protesters starting to shout from where I'm at here, saying Black Lives Matter. It sounded like. I have not heard from the bullhorn in a little bit that any kind of instructions to the crowd to disperse. We've of course heard that many times here, but I have not heard it in a little bit. Now police forming what looks like maybe a U-shaped or a half moon, maybe a crescent moon shape, now creating kind of a line between the edge of the Cromwell all the way through the intersection and now on the other side, as this confrontation still is going on here for several minutes. Oh, here we go again. We have more officers trying to maybe run after the crowd a little bit. We see people on the other side running away. And that appears, Todd, what you were mentioning at the fashion show, what we're seeing here at Las Vegas Boulevard and Flamingo.
Yeah, I had noticed that U shape. That's what I was going to say, Joe, that they're somewhat almost encircling at some point. It looks like as that may be the effort here is to make a circle around this crowd. I also noticed the cell phones, as just there's about 10 to 12 people just taping this whole incident as it goes down.
Yeah, I can hear now the crowd shouting Black Lives Matter. Another charging of officers, kind of pouncing towards officers now, or towards the crowd. There's now a line of folks, and now that SUV has moved out of the way, and people are kind of running after it. Not sure where they're headed, but now police kind of getting together. Okay. And I see them grabbing somebody, and this crowd getting very agitated, riled up. The sun is going down, the heat very hot, emotions very high, and here we are on Las Vegas Boulevard watching the frustrations and anger of this community boiling over, directed at police and law enforcement, and some drawing a line in the sand saying enough is enough with the incident that happened in Minnesota and the other incidents that we've talked about in the past and reported on here on Channel 13. This coming to a head here on Las Vegas Boulevard, guys.
Yeah, and please join.
Yeah, and Joe, we saw in the crowd right there, at least one of the protesters grabbing a fellow protester back, that man with the white T-shirt who appeared to really get aggressive with police, and so we're seeing some policing, if I could use that term, within this crowd of protesters to try and make sure things do not boil over. And we're sort of watching this whole thing play out, obviously live on television, as police sort of inch by inch, yard by yard, continue to move this line and continue to advance this line. If we take a look right now at our traffic camera, I'm watching right now one of our preview monitors. If we take a look at our traffic monitor, you can see how just in the past 20 minutes, how now officers have been successful in essentially moving off this crowd off the strip.
They're yelling, they're throwing items again now. There's more people now running towards our direction. Rudy's here, left, right here, up. I don't know what's going on here. We got people running towards us now.
Be careful.
I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah, this is Rudy down here on the ground too. We have now police pushing people that have kind of spilled out, and now they're corralling up here. It appears to be in a safe position right now, kind of out of the fray, and up here kind of an elevated position, as they say. But back to the crowd here, you can see they've gathered here, and police every so often advancing, maybe grabbing a few people, then pulling them back. And right in the center of the street there, Rudy, you can see some people, the officers right behind the line there. You can see them grabbing belongings. People may have dropped signs, backpacks, maybe tactical items from the police. We're not sure, but they have picked those items up. They've grabbed somebody right there in a white shirt, and Rudy right here coming up the stairs right now, a contingent of officers just feet away from where we're at, and then behind them is a number of officers with their helmets on, shields down, tactical vests, ready for whatever happens next. We hear now folks behind us and kind of around us saying no justice, no peace, and now folks being kind of moved away from where we're at right here. You can see, if you disobey another order from us, you're going to jail tonight, is what the officer just said to that woman, female. She walked away. She's got a sign, a face mask, as they kind of walk on the pedestrian bridge across from us. They didn't mention anything to us. Everyone's cleared out from where we are here, so we're just watching this happen here. The sun going down, and Tricia, go ahead.
And Joe, the white male that was in the white T-shirt that was taken away by officers, I had noticed him before because I noticed he was getting really verbal with that line with the officers in the front, and the camera took away, so I don't know what transpired after that, but I saw that he was taken away by two officers. We had that video. We had it live play out, but we missed that part. So obviously there's, in the front of the line, the tension is running high. I can tell when you look at the faces, as I've been watching this, people at times have been screaming at the officers as well. Now it seems to be somewhat peaceful. Yeah.
And Tricia, just as you were just talking, it just reminded me that we should, at least some point here in our coverage. I mean, I know you, Tricia, you know police officers in and around Southern Nevada and across the country, as do I, and as do Joe. And I should mention that on my social media pages today, I've seen a number of officers who I've known throughout my career express their dismay and sadness upon what they saw in Minnesota the other day. So I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't mention that there are a lot of officers out there who are extraordinarily upset about the events that unfolded in Minneapolis a couple of days ago. And we saw that obviously here last night with Sheriff Joe Lombardo releasing the statement that he did on Twitter. So, we should also remind our viewers that there are plenty of police officers here locally, I'm sure, who are outraged and very frustrated by the scenes that they saw play out there in Minnesota. But still, right now, they have a job to do, and the focus right now is to make sure that the protest happens, but happens peacefully and happens with relatively a little violence. And we've seen that. We've seen a couple skirmishes here and there, but for the most part, let's hope this thing is going to wrap up shortly and peacefully, because it would be a shame if things ended any other way from what we've seen so far.
Absolutely. And in the wake of the video, we've seen demonstrations like this, much more obviously violent. You've seen the images from Minneapolis on the news. And we have seen for the last 4 nights several demonstrations across the country. Here in Las Vegas has been pretty peaceful in a whole in terms of property damage. We will have some arrests tonight. We'll find out the latest from Metro. They have a staging area. They are going to make a statement to the media. But officers obviously doing their job. A lot of officers on the Las Vegas Strip tonight. In fact,
Yeah, and we're seeing. Go ahead, Trisha. Sorry.
I was just waiting to see if they were taking a demonstrator here to the left side. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, so the left side is Joe's position with Rudy. Go ahead, Joe. Yeah.
I was just mentioning that this group here, I don't know, they got cameras. One's got a drink in her hand from Starbucks. I don't know if they're tourists or what. They seemed a little out of place perhaps and just kind of confused about where to go. So police were just instructing them to go down the escalator, now moving them across the pedestrian bridge towards the Cromwell. Rudy, if you want to go back to the crowd here, I can hear them shouting now, "No justice, no peace." And they're chanting that over and over again. We haven't seen police do that kind of charging forward, grabbing someone out of the crowd, and then pulling back. In my estimation, as you mentioned, Tricia, that person that you had seen multiple times, it appears that maybe they go for the person who's instigating, or maybe the loudest that's inciting other folks to push back or protest or throw things or anything like that. So kind of a tactical move to go after someone who's maybe the most vocal and to try and neutralize them perhaps, and then you have less of a groupthink, if you will, of people getting together and maybe thinking they would challenge officers, throw items and those kinds of things. So we're just watching this play out. The sun going down, Metro Air Unit, I can see high above. They've got their spotlight now. We should be able to illuminate here in just a little bit, just beyond the tip of the Eiffel Tower. You can see it kind of shining in our direction. We'll be able to see it as the sun goes down. The sea of lights here, eerily reminiscent of some of the serious incidents we've seen on the Strip, and unfortunately the last few years. Officers going back now, doing another charging towards the crowd. We hear cheers and screams, another item being thrown towards police. Almost made contact with someone, one of the officers. They ducked it and it fell back behind the line. Officers now advancing towards, we have another group here charging towards the protesters. They now more, I think I saw another bottle get thrown up towards in the Ravens direction. Another item just got thrown, skidding across the intersection there of Las Vegas Boulevard. They're dragging someone right now, right by that front of that cruiser right there. Snatched them out of the crowd, and now they're bringing them into custody, doing their pat downs, looking for weapons, those kinds of things. But the first thing they do is to grab that person and get them in cuffs. Another person right there in a white tank top or gray tank top, it looks like, black shorts, now being led away by a number of officers, 3 officers. Another person being thrown to the ground now. See a helmet or some kind of helmet has come off an officer. Charging again, deeper now into the crowd, grabbing more people, it looks like. This is the farthest we've seen police at this point go into the crowd of protesters, and we can't see. There's a lot of people standing in the way here at Cromwell between us and the camera and what's going on the other side of it. But you can imagine officers grabbing whoever they can and then subduing people, putting them, restraining their arms and then moving them back. I see a number of people now in being restrained and being led away. Now police are the whole line is now moving. We have a Metro police motorcycle just behind this line, and the crowd growing louder. I can hear them throwing items. I just saw them throwing items. Their chants and cheers and taunts perhaps getting louder as police move this group of folks that are at Flamingo and Las Vegas Boulevard now farther east, just between Bally's and the Cromwell.
Yeah, they are. The officers right now are in unique and total coordination here, and it's been really compelling to watch this play out, Joe. We've seen this scene play out again from the Fashion Show Mall, and we're watching it sort of again right now. And the timing and the lockstep coordination the Metro officers have under a situation of great duress and a situation where obviously The crowds have a lot of emotions and a lot of anger, especially right now that we see just a small crowd right now, but the last remaining protesters seem to be obviously the most vehemently committed to this idea of this protest today. And so they're taking this extra effort here, this extra level of coordination to have to disperse them. But if we take a look there, you see on the right side of your screen right now, that's the view from our traffic camera. And we've watched in the past 25 minutes as that line has gotten further and further down Flamingo.
What do you see, Joe?
Go ahead, Joe.
Over a little bit there. Sorry, I just saw there was some quick movement out of the corner of my eye, and I saw and looked like someone was being taken into custody just on the near side of the camera, but not on Flamingo, being taken in to custody. But it just was really quick, and now that line of officers moving closer and out of our view, and they will be out of our view here in moments. And it looks like police have now corralled this area. So I don't know how much longer we'll be able to see what's going on, but between Bally's and Cromwell, if anyone's listening in the booth, or I know our manager listening, if there could be someone maybe on the other side on Flamingo by Koval, I think roads are clearly shut down, but that's the way things are moving at this point here. But this intersection now empty. Just moments ago, Rudy, we were showing folks being taken into custody, and now the intersection clearing up, and those protesters and police now moving in concert as police move forward and maybe get closer to the protesters, then they retreat. And we've seen this kind of pattern over and over again, but we're losing daylight very quickly here as well. That's also another factor.
Yeah, and I know Metro's getting ready to make some kind of statement. And we're waiting on that as well. They set up a staging area, and Jackie's over in that area, and we're hoping to hear from them or effort them. If it's not live on air, we'll certainly be covering that on social media for you to hear what Metro has to say and kind of give us a wrap up today. Now, we're going on 3 hours now. This started at 5 o'clock, Joe, this Black Lives Matter protest today. As you can see, Metro right there taking somebody else over into custody. 2 people. So we've seen several arrests.
And I would have to say,
you mentioned that this has been going on for quite a while now, guys. I don't mean to talk over you, but this has been going on for a while now, and we see people getting kind of led away in restraint, and then that group, Rudy, if you show that group of folks, that we are just about to lose the visual as Metro Police move ever closer to maybe Koval on Flamingo from Las Vegas Boulevard. We can see just kind of through the building right there, just barely, we have officers there, and then on the other side of them, farther away from the camera, we have the protesters. But as you mentioned, we're seeing folks essentially being let off one by one and going to what we believe, you mentioned the processing units, that bus perhaps is where they're going to be staging people and maybe taking them to jail. And one other quick thing, Rudy, if you won't be able to see it, but I can see through the trees over to the right by that ambulance that was over there that we saw kind of on the island. I see the back door of it now open, and I see 2 Metro officers. Rudy, I don't know if you can. We have a siren kind of wailing, but you can zoom in, or if you can see that it looks like they're attending to someone there at the ambulance, guys.
Joe, we're going to head on over to Jackie right now.
Check in with Jackie, right? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Tricia, go ahead.
No, that's okay. It's the delay, Todd. I get it. Jackie, what are you seeing at the Metro staging area?
Yeah, Trish and Todd, we're just waiting right now for Metro to begin talking. We just watched a few SWAT vehicles driving by, and we are waiting for them to begin. Of course, Tricia, like you said, this protest has been going on since about 2 o'clock this afternoon. Now, several hours in, Joe has been describing the scene there, but we are waiting the corner of Sammy Davis Jr. show, just a couple of blocks. Most of the action is right now to begin.
All right, so Jackie Kostic right now is standing by live as we're expecting Metro to give us an update as to the events that we watched unfold here today. And Joe, going back now to your position, from what I can tell from our coverage, really what we've seen unfold in the past 20 minutes or so was really the most amount of people that we've seen arrested in a specific window. I don't have really a hard count, but I would say we saw at least 6, maybe to 8 people at the least being arrested right there in front of you. Is that also sort of line up with what you saw today.
Yeah, that's what I've been seeing. I would say it's probably in the total of the time we've been out here and the number of people that I've seen kind of pulled away and let off. You know, these are people in custody, not necessarily arrested, but
okay, Joe,
taken into custody.
we do have Metro.
We
do have Metro right now standing up to the podium. Let's listen to the Metro.
Last night, early evening, we received some information that there would be a protest on Las Vegas Boulevard about 2 o'clock today. We mobilized some resources to be prepared to assist, provide services, not only for the protesters, but anyone else in the community that would be affected by the protest. We mobilized our resources and responded today to the protest. We talked to the group initially, which was relatively small. They were peacefully protesting. We continue to work with that group. We informed that group that we are asking them to remain peaceful, not violate any laws, continue to keep our community safe, and that we urge them to understand that we understand the current situation. We are very sympathetic, and at the end of the day, we're here to support them just as much as we are to support anyone else. The protesters have a right to their free speech and to their right to protest. We're here to protect that, but we're just asking that they remain lawful and safe. Ultimately, as the night went on, many more people joined the protest, and some of those protesters became more violent, and some of those protesters started breaking some of the laws. Some of these individuals were likely agitators that just filled into the group, and then others may be part of the original protest. We do not know, but what we've told the group and what we continue to tell anyone who is protesting, we are in full support of anyone's right to protest. It is constitutionally protected, and it is something that we're here to enforce and protect as well. However, that is limited to peaceful protest. That is not, those kind of rights do not extend to violating the law, putting other citizens in danger, or causing any other unlawful, unruly acts that create problems on Las Vegas Boulevard or anywhere. So at this point in time, we are working best we can with those that are out there. We have mobilized a decent amount more of resources as a precaution, and we'll continue to work carefully to keep this as safe as possible. I'll just conclude. I don't have much time because I do have to get back to the event, but I will conclude by just telling the community and the protesters that we are fully aware of how delicate and problematic the situation is nationally. If anyone didn't see, our sheriff did post publicly yesterday informing the community the same thing that I feel and the same thing that my officers feel, which is the video that has gone viral. It is very disturbing. It does not align with the tactics that we use here at LVMPD. And at the end of the day, we care deeply about our community and the trust we build with that community. So we're here to make sure that those that have a legitimate grievance to protest and are angry have a right to protest. We're just asking that they remain peaceful and obey the laws so we can keep everyone safe. So what we do understand everything that's going on, and we care deeply about it just as much as anyone else.
Can you share how many people are in custody at this point and how long you will be having crews out on this trip?
I don't have the exact number of people that are in custody. We have arrested a number of individuals. I don't have the count off the top of my head, but ultimately those were individuals that were violating the law, and we have been we've made it as easy as possible for people to just disperse or go home, but these are individuals that intentionally wanted to either commit violence or intentionally were breaking the law.
What type of laws were they breaking? Can you say specifically what type of things they were doing that they were taken into custody for?
Unfortunately, I don't have the specifics for every single person that was arrested, so I can't give you that information. But I can tell you that as we inform the protesters, we do tell them what they can and cannot do, so they're aware.
We spoke with some protesters who think that, and I know you mentioned that you're in support of George Floyd and what happened in the video, but some protesters here feel that you're not in support of the cause they're spreading, and they feel like there is some violence coming from Metro. What is your response to that?
We are in full support and sympathetic to what's going on. At the end of the day, I think we have a very good track record of showing that we care deeply about our community. We are very proactive in resolving any kinds of issues that we create within our agency. We cannot control what happens in other agencies across the United States, but ultimately we put our community first, and we are essentially serving both the protesters and those that we're trying to protect on the boulevard who have their stores and businesses to run as well.
Was anyone hurt?
whether it be officers or protesters?
I don't have that information at the moment right now. I can tell you that there wasn't anything significant enough that I've been advised at the moment. Unfortunately, I don't have any more time. I would love to answer more questions, but we will set up another briefing if this continues longer. I do appreciate your guys' time, and I ask the community that if they do decide to protest, please, you have to keep it peaceful. This is in the best interest of our entire Las Vegas community.
So at this time,
Thank you.
no officers hurt, but you
Sorry, I have to go
had
now.
bottles thrown. Though,
Thank
right?
you.
All right, there you heard from
All right, there we have
Metro.
Metro officers here describing really, Tricia, the difficult balance that we watched play out today, and that Metro obviously expressing their sympathy and empathy with the outrage that has sparked all of this here in Las Vegas, but also across the country, but also while at the same time trying to make sure things stayed peaceful and saying that, you know, these protesters have a right to free speech, but things obviously escalated at certain points, and that's why they say they had to make some arrests here.
Absolutely, and he spoke on behalf of Lombardo and all the officers. The death of Mr. Floyd was deeply disturbing. The officers' actions and inactions, as our sheriff had tweeted, were inconsistent with the training and protocols of their profession. And again, our sheriff said that he strives every day to build trust with this community. And so you're looking at the pictures now live as the sun sets. It's getting dark outside, and this is the very latest. The officers they came out of the paddy wagon, as you just saw before, lined up there with a smaller group now of protesters, but it's still going on, and we're going on 3 hours now that Black Lives Matter. They've been out there protesting on the Las Vegas Strip, and that speaks to me the importance of this issue to these people and shedding light on what is happening across the country, and in this case with the death of George Floyd and that video that is so incredibly disturbing to watch. All right, we've been on the air now for 3 hours covering this, 2 hours since 6 o'clock, and it started at 5 o'clock. So for now, we're going to wrap it up. That does it for this special coverage of the protest on the Strip tonight. Remember, we're always on at ktnv.com, our mobile app, and your favorite streaming device.